Nityanandaya Guruve Shisha Samsara Harine Bhaktakaye Kadehaya Namaste Chitsaratmane Om Namah Shivaya Guruve Sachidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase Om Savana Bhavantu Savano Bhunaktu Saraviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinamadittamastu Ma Vivishavahe Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. For those of you who don't know, I am Swami Chaitananda. I am the disciple of Swami Rudrananda, whose statue is to my right, and the disciple of, in his lineage, founded by his guru, Swami Nityananda, on my left. And for 9 years, from 1973 until he died in 1982, I was a student of Swami Muktananda. I have been also, from 1982 until 1986, connected closely with Swami Lakshmanju in Srinagar, who was the last living lineage holder in the lineage of Kashmiri Shaivism. I'm also the disciple of Lama Wangdu and Chada Rinpoche, having received lineage transmission in the Nyingma lineage of the pacification of suffering of Padamba Sanjay. And I have studied also in Sri Vidya in Mokambika in South Karnataka, in Kanchipuram, in Tamil Nadu under the auspices of the Shankaracharya of Kanchipuram. I have studied and received Kaula initiation in Sri Vidya from Ramdayal Shastri, a Bihari tantric who received his training in Varanasi and in Kamakhya. I'm telling you all this because I'm trying to convince you, I don't have to, I'm trying to convince you of my qualification. And the reason for that is because I have studied yoga and taught yoga since 1968, which is about, in some cases, 3 times the age of you guys. And I am the founder of the first purely American yoga-based community in the United States. I have studied in India extensively, and what I want to say to you about it is it's extremely hard. It's extremely hard. And the reason why it's extremely hard is because, well, to begin with, Indians like to think of Americans as cows that they have come into their barnyard to milk. And I say that extremely respectfully, but there's a certain degree of disrespect that, I have encountered as an American everywhere in India, without exception. And I have no problem with that. It's just the environment in which I had to operate in to have to learn what I really wanted to learn. The translators in India, it's also, because I was at age 23, the successor to my guru Rudy, who passed away very suddenly, leaving me with a community of 1,000 or so followers and no money. I had to first see to my own continued training. I had to see to the welfare and stability of the community and the people who were a part of it around Rudy, and I had to create a financial support mechanism that was based on our own efforts, not on donations, because being a yoga community in the United States in 1973 didn't really attract that much support, especially being Americans. If we were Indians, probably it would have been different. But going to India, I did not speak Hindi or Sanskrit. I didn't really have the time to learn it. I wasn't also that interested to learn it, as I felt in the beginning that, I have translators who would help me with that. The problem with translators is, there's two problems in studying in India. One is, the Indians today don't really understand, in my experience, don't really understand the non-dual traditions of Shakti Shaivism. In India, in the north, Shakti Shaivism is completely wiped out. In the south, it still exists in its completely Brahmanicized form. The amount of time, therefore, that it takes to understand the information that you are assumed to know, that is encoded into the scripture of the tradition, and also into the oral transmission of the tradition, would take lifetimes for a Western person. Just take forever to understand what they really mean. So all of my study, of the ritual activity, well, let me back up. So, the reason why I undertook this pilgrimage into Sri Vidya, which is the tradition of Shakti Shaivism, that the worship of the goddess Tripura Sundari exists. The reason I did this is because in 1977, while doing what Rudy called class and what we called class, which is an eyes open transmission that you'll experience tonight. Oh yeah, and we have a really interesting program and an intense program this weekend. Tonight I will do the transmission, and Saturday night I'll do it. Tomorrow night we will do a Sri Chakra Puja and Havan outside in that tent that you saw out there, to try to give you a complete experience. The experience tonight of the energy transmission is, in my opinion, based in Shakta Shaivism, and specifically in this tradition of Sri Vidya, in that in Sri Vidya, one of the important principles is the total unity of guru, disciple, goddess, and ultimate reality. So in this experience that we will share, we will establish our own total identity in each other, I absorbing you into me, you absorbing me into you, and discovering this total interconnectedness. Hopefully. It's work. In the beginning, it's work. It's not easy. If it were easy, the whole world would be perfect already. Establishing this sense of interconnectedness and holding that space creates the opportunity for us to appreciate, our total interconnectedness in everything. Furthermore, it engages all the different dimensions of Sri Vidya practice, the outer dimension, the inner dimension, and the goddess dimension in one experience. My own journey was that in 1977, I was sitting in meditation. I was doing this transmission in Bloomington, Indiana, where I lived. And I had, at that moment, I was sitting in a room of about this many people, 125 people or so. And all of a sudden, the entire room went completely red. And I saw nothing but red in front of me. And as I was kind of, whoa, red. At a 45-degree angle out of the right, I saw a light, which was like the light of a pearl or a reflected moon. And that light was growing and coming close to me. And as it came bigger and bigger, it took the form of a woman who was wearing a lungi on around her hips and a pearl necklace around her neck. And she came completely closer and closer and closer to me until she dissolved into me. At least that was my experience. I didn't see her after that light came completely on me. And as that happened, I heard several words. The experience passed, the red faded, the room came back to itself, and I completed my work in that moment and went on. I then reported that experience to Swami Muktananda, who advised me to go to India and meet a particular pundit, and I did. And that pundit explained to me the experience that I had, and encouraged me to study more. And at that point, Chakrapani Ulal, who was my dear friend and the assistant to an astrologer for Swami Muktananda and Siddha Yoga, connected me with the Adiga family in Mokambika in South Karnataka, and I went there. my journey continued through various interactions in India and various difficulties with different circumstances there. Until the next really significant point for me, I got initiated in Kamakshi and received from the Shankaracharya of Kanchipuram there a Sri Chakra, which is still the Sri Chakra that I keep in my puja room, and that occasionally I've shown pictures of. I then kind of got so sick of India. I got sick of the pollution, and I got sick of all the people who were constantly coming who wanted anything but spirituality, who wanted me to get jobs for their kids or get them into school or find them some career after their retirement from the military, or it went on and on and on and on. But nobody, or cure some disease or something or another. And I was living in Delhi part of the year at the time, and I just got to a point where I was overwhelmed by it all. And I got up one morning and packed my stuff and hopped a plane to Kathmandu and spent the next 18 years mostly there. During that time, I met Lama Wangdu, and I also began a relationship and a research program on the Karmacharyas, who are the last living community of esoteric Shaiva priests on the planet. This image of the goddess, which is Siddhi Lakshmi, comes from the tradition of the Karmacharyas who are established in Kathmandu and were the priests in the royal palace and their tantric worship there. The thing I want to cut to is where I have come down now about this particular system of practice and all the systems in general. Let me back up again and say, in the Tantric tradition, there are 4 transmissions that are considered to be esoteric transmissions of the Kaula system. And those 4 traditions, or Amnayas, are the Trika, the Krama, the Kubjika, and Sri Vidya. Now, these systems are said to flow from the mouth of Shiva, and the image of this is a lingam with 4 faces on it, called Pashupadinath, Lord of the Bound, whose main temple these days is in Kathmandu, and was the principal deity of the earliest sort of tantric community that we know of, called the Pashupatas. Pashupatas evolved into the Lakulisas, the Kamfatas, which still exist, or at least maybe, the Karpalikas, and the Nathagoris, into which I'm also initiated. All of these systems are absolutely non-dual systems. They speak of consciousness as the ultimate reality, out of which everything arises: your mind, your emotions, your physical body, the entire world of your experience. And the system itself, I think, for me, is a language. I look at the system as a language, an attempt to describe an experience. And it is describing an experience to people who are steeped in the imagery of this experience for thousands of years. This experience is a part of the childhood, the upbringing, the training of all Brahmins and lots of other families in India. And so to them, it means something. To me, it meant very little, frankly. I found it, for the most part, impenetrable. But because I was blessed by this vision and this whole experience opened up, I kept walking ahead, looking for the punchline in it all. And for that kind of happened to me in Kamakya. This is a picture of Kamakya. Kamakya is a temple in outside Guwahati in Assam, in far eastern India. It is one of 4 temples, 4 places. It's called Kamrup in the system of Shaktipitas. It's one of 4 places that is mentioned in every list of places of residence for the goddess Shaktipita. The earliest list contained 4: Kamarup, Jalandhara, Udayana, and Punyagiri. The later lists go to 108, and even in some instances 1,008. It's a part of a tradition, this idea is a part of a tradition that links the physical body with the geographical world of India, and the physical body as a kind of holographic representation of the universe. I was in Kamakya, where I used to go. I mean, I still go there, but I used to go there and stay for a long time and practice there. And one evening at sunset, sitting on a little balcony of the guest house I was staying in, the goddess came to me, is the way I'm going to describe it. I had this experience that a presence enveloped me and said to me, I'm everything. I am everything. I am the river that you see in the distance. I'm the sun you see setting. I'm the sky it's setting in. I'm the river you see in the distance. I'm the hills that surround it. I am the trees and the birds. I am your body, your senses, and even the mind, and that these thoughts appear on. I am everything. this experience separated my senses from their objects and allowed my mind to rest in itself, free of any experience of distinction between myself and everything that appeared in my environment. I became completely at peace. And that shifted that experience shifted, well, I should say, at that point my experience was 1 and 2. 1 is complete peace, and 2, the fluctuation of my breath. Now, I know that a lot of you have studied, with other people. You are interested in goddesses and in goddess worship, and I really appreciate that. And certainly the imagery here, we're surrounded by, pictures of a lot of goddesses, but I want you to forget about every goddess completely. Just forget about it. Because there's only one goddess. There's 50,000 discussions of goddesses that exist in 50,000 different kind of layers that are overcoated one over the other. There's so many goddesses, and frankly, most of them are completely misunderstood in the West. Part of the problem is the translators translating Sanskrit as it was used in the 10th century, even though the Indians literally demand that we understand that Sanskrit is an eternal language, that is the original language of God, which was poured down on the earth, revealed through the rishis who established the Vedas, and has been unchanging ever since. That's total bullshit. It is. It's bullshit. And all you have to do is be able to read Sanskrit to see that the language, like English, like French, like German, like every other language on the planet, is constantly evolving. You can look at the rituals and the literature of Shaivism and see that the whole understanding of Shakta Shaivism is also constantly evolving. The earliest versions of tantric literature, my brain is, the earliest versions basically include 2 chakras and 2 channels. The oldest texts speak of 2 chakras and 2 channels. By the 10th century, or maybe earlier, because the Vamakeshvari Mata Tantra, the earliest of the Sri Vidya Tantras, the earliest it probably is the 9th century. My opinion about this tradition is that this is a complete and in fact very elegant refinement of the Trika. So any of you who have studied Shaiva non-dual systems in Kashmir Shaivism will understand that The Trika is the earliest of the known Shakta Shaiva ritual traditions, practice traditions. The theory now is that the Trika emerged in West India in the 5th or about the 5th century. It emerged, from a community of esoteric practitioners called Karpalikas, who were very out there. They would have definitely never made it, even slightly, in the yoga studio culture of America. Because everything about them, everything about their lives was intentionally, in your face to all of the people who understood that they were the pure and orthodox, absolutely right way to do it. They were utterly transgressive. They lived in cemeteries and cremation grounds, which are considered to be completely terrible, impure places by the orthodoxy. They smeared their bodies with the ashes of the dead, which is also like a huge no-no. They carried a skull, which they considered to be their spirit guru, and it's possible that that's true. And they collected alms, and particularly they received food from a bowl, and they ate out of a bowl made from a skull. In time, the Trika, which is extensively described in a text translated in English, not completely, called the Siddha Yogeshwari Mata Tantra, and another text translated in English, also not completely, called Brahmayamala Tantra. The Trika that is described slowly evolves from this cremation ground-based, utterly transgressive system of practice, which involved eating meat, drinking alcohol, I'm assuming smoking tons of weed, and intimate contact in a ritual format. It evolved into, by the 10th century, a system which is being completely domesticated and brought into the households of Orthodox, or at least superficially Orthodox Brahmins in Kashmir. The system evolves. The Srividya system, I think, is a very elegant condensation and reorganization of the Trika. And I think, it emerges in Kashmir at a date, equal to Abhinavagupta's time. And what has happened is the three goddesses of the Trika and their separate chakras, which are represented in one mandala, have been fused and layered one on top of the other. And those three goddesses of the Trika, Para, Parapara, and Apara, become the one goddess, Tripura Sundari. Furthermore, Tripura Sundari, the radiance, or I think more exactly, the beauty of the three cities or three fortresses. I think the tree means the body, the the outer world up to the body, the inner world up to the level of Sudhavidya, that's a whole nother story, up to the level of clear mind, and the third is the ultimate reality from which all experience arises. The three goddesses are permeated with Sundari, beauty. Now, interestingly, the idea of beauty as a fundamental quality of the ultimate reality is present not in the Trika, but in the Krama system. And the Krama system is like the first and only system of cognitive study and research that exists in the ancient world, anywhere. Not in the Greeks, not in the Mesopotamians, not anywhere are they beginning to look at cognition, human cognition, as a source of study, and trying to understand through their ritual practice, what is all this experiencing that's going on? Who is experiencing? What is experienced? The Krama is basically teaching us that everything is an expression of a fundamental and ultimate abundance that has as its qualities, on the highest level, beauty, on the intermediate level, bliss or joy, and on a very basic level, pleasure. And so there is, in the Krama, a basic examination of pleasure and pain, which evolves into a very pure experience, a very solid conviction that everything in this world arises and subsides out of pure beauty. And that beauty is our own human essence. Sitting in Kamakya, having been instructed by the goddess herself, or one of her many attendants, that everything was her. And sitting in that experience for a bit, I came to realize that the fundamental power of Shiva, the power of will, knowledge, and action, jhana, icha, and kriya. And frankly, I have these days zero interest in Sanskrit terminology. I'll back up again or digress for a moment and say, one of the things for me about my entire life's work was my Guru Rudy was not interested in becoming Indian. He didn't give any Indian names. He didn't wear Indian clothes when, he had a very difficult and challenging moment with Swami Muktananda. which is a very interesting story in which this statue is a physical expression of the resolution of that conflict. Swami Muktananda made the statue for me and gave it to me, and it arrived in my house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the day he died. But Rudy was not interested in India. He was interested in understanding what was happening in India in its most essential form. And his guru was Nityananda, who taught no ritual, who mostly wore nothing, who took nothing from anybody, never had anyone ever in his life that he was entangled with. Nityananda was an avadut who was an expression of the highest dimension of spirituality in its absolutely simplest, purest form. That was Rudy's guiding light. He wasn't interested in India. I was interested in India because Rudy passed away after I was there 2 years, and at age 23 I landed in charge of 11 ashrams in the United States and a few hundred people, and there was no money. And I was trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. Because the fact of the matter is, at that point in my life, I had no idea. I had an experience that I was capable of sharing, and I was totally, with my whole life, committed to developing. So I went to India. I learned all this, and where I have come to now is that I understand that the goddess, will, knowledge, and action is a respiratory process. The triangle at the center of the Sri Chakra, which is representative of Icha, pure being. Jhana is knowledge. That is the in-breath. Kriya is action. That is the out-breath. And in the middle, the stillness is Icha Shakti. And the goddess is literally the breath of life that is the livingness of the universe. In whatever form you appreciate any goddess, the goddess herself is the breath of life. And it is the breath of life that gives rise to the life that is the whole, absolutely complete, absolutely abundant, mind-shattering beauty that is the essence of my existence and your existence. Indian spirituality, yoga, Hindu religion, and I grew up a Catholic and I have really almost no interest in religion. Part of the struggle for me in my life has been that I grew up in the Catholic Church, and my parents were, well, let's put it like this. They went to church 6 days a week at least until they were like 87 and couldn't go to church anymore. Then they only went once a week. I was absolutely and am still not interested in religion. And my own personal tendency is that I am against religion business. I think religion teachers, by definition, lie. And once you start lying, then you cheat and steal. And I've really tried hard not to be like that. And further, I have observed that religious organizations like the Catholic Church, after some authentic explosion of truth and realization that maybe possibly happened there, organizations as they endure become increasingly about the organization itself and not their mission, and increasingly become about hypocrisy. So, teaching this Sri Chakra Puja to you is not about creating an organization of goddess worshippers, but rather giving you the tools, a practice, which I have profound confidence in, that on your own, with some encouragement and follow-up study, you will be able to accomplish whatever it is that is the limit of your commitment, to your own self-realization and liberation. Respiratory process is the goddess, the breath of life that pours forth this entire experience of the universe, for her own, as the fulfillment of her own desire, her own creative impulse, her own pleasure, joy, and beauty, ultimate beauty. Each of us, we are all the goddess. This world is the goddess. And the purpose of this practice, established in itself in ancient days, the purpose of this practice is to remind us, cause us to get in touch with the total unity of our body, mind, and field of experience, and to appreciate within this body, mind, and field experience the respiratory process that is eternally happening. All of the, understanding about learning that goes on a lot in our world teaches us that when we take some information and we combine it with some activity, that is the optimum chance for us to remember that, to inculcate that information into our bodies and our muscles and our nervous system, and even all the way down into our breath. And so I have a student who is a wonderful person and an extraordinarily talented musician and a paranoid conspiracy theorist to the ultimate degree. Now, I'm not knocking conspiracy theorists or conspiracy theories. I too am a conspiracy theorist. I am. I'm always reading history books. You know, I like to read history and biographies, historical biography, and I'm always looking behind it to try to understand where the money was going. Because that tells us a little bit about the reality of the story versus the story. An interesting book you guys might like to read, some of you, that sort of describes how America got where it is today, is a book called Super Mob by Gus Russo that talks about the Chicago Mafia's takeover of the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, and at the same time, the emergence of their extraordinary real estate business. All of this engineered by 4 people who came from Chicago in 1936. One of them was Jules Stein, you know, about whom one of the most important, you know, ophthalmology research centers in the world is named after. And Lou Wasserman, his partner in MCA, which was the largest television and movie production company and agency. They were agents and producers, which was outlawed at the time. Lou Wasserman, whose wing of that research hospital is right next door to Jules Stein. And Stanley Korshak, who was a labor lawyer who took over the Teamsters. And the 4th guy who went from Chicago to LA, who took over the creative part of they installed as the head of the creative side, the artists, the actors, and the writers. His name was Ronald Reagan. This book is not written by a conspiracy theorist. It's written by a guy who was a lead researcher for Frontline. He also worked for 60 Minutes. It's Super Mob. Anyway, it's a cool book, and I have a friend who is a conspiracy theorist who's way more wild than me, and she went off on me a while ago about my teaching Sri Chakra Puja, because she accused me of teaching a system of mind control that was really the beginnings of a religious organization that you know, was going to do harm and spread evil in the world. You know, my purpose in teaching you this is to give you a compelling practice that will allow you to meditate daily on and inculcate into yourself with the experience and an experience of abundance and beauty that will support you as you navigate this world, unwinding the tensions and the disappointments of your ancestors, which you were embedded with, you know, upon your conception. Relieving you of all of your unhappinesses, relieving you of all of your disappointments, and at the same time completely shifting your family system, you know, relieving even your closest loved ones of some of theirs as you release yourself from that family system to further, you know, for an opportunity to further refine yourself in whatever way you choose. Having an altar with a Sri Chakra on it is a very compelling reminder of what your personal commitment is to yourself and what the effort to true self-care involves. I find my own altar calls to me every day. It calls to me no matter how much sleep I've had in the night. It calls to me however grumpy I wake up in the morning. I don't wake up grumpy that much. I wake up groggy sometimes. My altar calls to me. Because of my altar, my practice is unfailing. Every day I take care of my altar. No matter how I feel about, my day or how my body feels or whatever, I get up every day and I do my puja. Because it wouldn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right not to do it. Every day I clean my altar. Every day I gather, and when I'm here, I'm blessed with someone who gathers flowers for me. But every day, I make the offerings, I clean the altar, I prepare the offerings, I make them myself. It's just the way I live. And I think, this, even though Nityananda, it's not apparent to me that Nityananda ever did any external ritual. This external part of the practice is compelling to me, and it is the doorway for me into the internal part of the practice, which I am sure Nityananda did because he documents that at an early stage of his life in his teaching, which was written down in Kerala, which talks exactly about the topics of Kundalini, chakras and channels, liberation, Shaktipat and liberation. The reason why there are two reasons why I study Shakti Shaivism. One is because one day I'm in South Fallsburg. This was the Siddha Yoga ashram, and Muktananda was alive. It's in upstate New York. I was in South Fallsburg. It was after lunch. Typically, there was nothing happening there, and so I was in my room. How I happened to get my own room in the ashram, I have no idea, but I had my own room. And laying on my bed, and I was reading a science fiction book. I like science fiction. I did like science fiction in those days. It was a great escape. Being a spiritual teacher is a completely shitty job. It is. It's a shit job. People think being a guru is like this, you're a big shot, and you think you're a big shot. Well, maybe some people do. For me, being a guru is, first of all, putting on a t-shirt with a big target on the front of it and a target on the back. And the second thing it is being a real guru is being a plumber. And you have your arms, you are up to your elbows every day in other people's shit. It is not a very attractive circumstance, and it is a miserable way to make a living. But my guru, Rudy, appeared in my life at a moment when I was praying for some help. He appeared in my life, and he accepted me unconditionally and without any question. I didn't have to submit a resume. He never asked me for anything. And I know I look like a drowned rat walking in from Bloomington, Indiana, into his shop in New York. And Rudy's shop was an amazing place. Rudy accepted me unconditionally. loved me to the extent of my ability to accept, and supported me more than anybody in my life had ever done. And I felt like, and opened doors for me in my life that, are a completely unimaginable possibility. Rudy was a human. Muktananda was a human. Nityananda, I'm not so sure about. He was maybe not human. And I have I am the first person ever to write in English about Nityananda. I'm the first person to ever write an English commentary on the Shiva Sutras, which is called Dynamic Stillness. Rudy opened doors for me to an unimaginable possibility. And I never felt like, hey, thanks, was quite enough. Thanks, Rudy. Sounded like bullshit to me. So I committed my life to being there for anybody who actually might need me, for whatever they needed me for, because it wasn't my job to decide that, and to support a transformation in whomever presented themselves to be transformed. For me, this Sri Chakra practice that I stepped into was part of the unfoldment of the Shaktipat that I received from Rudy. And people these days talk about Shaktipat as if it's, like a movie. Oh, I got Shaktipat from this, that intensive. I went there for a moment. I had this wiggle and jiggle, and wowie zowie, and now I'm, off to my job, to make a career. I need to have whatever. Okay, fine. For me, Shaktipat is, if it happens, it is a living experience that continues to unfold itself through the course of one's entire life to the degree that we nurture it. This practice, which is a compelling outer practice, which leads us to a deeper and more profound connection with our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and our souls, and allows for us to unwind every tension that we have accumulated through every lifetime of passing through this worldly life, and become ultimately established in ourself as, and recognizing we are nothing but the breath of God. We are the goddess. The goddess is the breath of God. It is this respiratory process that, ultimately the Shakti Shaivas, in giving predominance to the goddess, decided that it was respiratory process that was responsible for consciousness, and not consciousness that was responsible for respiratory process. Ultimately, there is a polydynamic system that the entire universe is an expression of, which is living, which aliveness, which is beauty and joy and pleasure and abundance, and that is the total unity of Shiva and Shakti. So we're not doing this to start a religion. We're not even doing this to become religious. We are doing this to experience all of the dimensions of breath, of the breath in this body, all of the dimensions of this breath in this body which lead us to a profound and complete fulfillment. This practice and this practice is about the vibrancy of the vitality, the vastness of breath, the vastness of the breath of life, and its expression on every scale, almost infinitely. I'm not interested in Sanskrit terminology. I just want to say this again. I'm interested in the experience that was the very essence of this practice. I think all of the different features of this practice were drawn in from disparate elements within India over the period of 2,000 years, which all continued to be folded over on one another over and over and over and over again, until even their original meaning, the original context, was lost, and now it has become a highly refined system of language which for the most part means nothing to me. And I want to keep it that way. And I want to keep it that way because I want to be able to live in the essential truth of my own self, my own highest self, and I want to be able to share that highest self with you in a simple, pure, complete way. And I don't want to be entangled in jargon which may ultimately end up meaning nothing. I really don't like the jargon that tends to form up in organizations like ours that ultimately means nothing. It's like, I used to wander through the ashram in South Fallsburg or in Ganeshpuri, and people would say, "Oh, isn't that amazing what the Shakti did?" Or, "The Shakti did that." Or, the Shakti was doing I'm thinking, Shakti does everything. What are you talking about? We end up, in our attempt to be charming, and I know you all are, saying things that have no meaning, which is totally wonderful and fine, except in the context of this sharing, in which we want to try to be, in some sense, as clear and simple as possible. Now, I know I wandered all over the place this morning, in a way, talking about conspiracy theories and religious organizations and my guru. But, all of that is to say that we're here to experience connection, alignment, and flow. Connection, alignment, and flow is the essence of the the practice of Tripura Sundari. And cultivating connection with ourself, connection to our practice, and connection with our teachers, we will experience an alignment that allows all of the accumulated experience and knowledge of that teacher to be transmitted into us, to be received deeply and simply and purely and profoundly, as an awakening of our own breath of life, as a release of the tensions that constrain the breath of life's function in us, allowing that respiratory process to expand and expand and expand and expand until it has completely dissolved every constraint within us, and we see within ourselves, we see our life as nothing but the breath of God. We have an interesting week. I forgot to mention that when I said class and Havan in the night, that every afternoon, at what time, Moni? Every afternoon at 2, that's really not Sunday afternoon. This afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and Saturday afternoon, Moni is going to teach details. The details she's going to teach are Nyasa and Mudra, which I will deal with in theory. She will teach you the practice of it. She will teach you the 9 mudras of the Sri Chakra, of the Chakreshvaris, and of Mahatripura Sundari. And she will teach you the Bija mantra of the Chakreshvaris and Mahatripura Sundari. She will also, let's see. Oh yeah, wait, I got it. Okay. Nyasa and Mudra, and then the details of the puja, the layout for the puja, all of this and the various details. And further, what she's going to explain to you is the construction of a Sri Chakra with flour. Not with flower petals, with rice flour or wheat flour, whatever flour you want to use. Now, I have a Sri Chakra on my altar upstairs, and that was a little bit expensive. And this Sri Chakra is also a little bit expensive. It costs about $1,500, maybe a little more, and when you 16 or so if you put the gold on it. But it's ritually perfect. Originally, we got some Sri Chakras from India that turned out to be, as you would expect from Indians sometimes, it was a little bit cheating. So the Sri Chakras that we use now come from Ganesh Puri. They are made, there. They are hopefully always blessed at the feet of Nityananda Samadhi, but that's not, I can't absolutely guarantee that. But they're a little bit expensive. There's a smaller one than this that's a few $100s, and there's a tiny one. But if you don't want to spend the money, it's perfectly fine, and perfectly acceptable that you can make a Sri Chakra out of flour, on a metal plate, or even on a wooden plate, and we'll teach you how to do that. So, so not having the money for a Sri Chakra should not be an excuse for not doing the practice. Okay. Tomorrow I will explain the Sri Chakra itself, the outer practice. On Saturday we'll talk about the inner practice, and on Sunday we'll talk on Sunday we'll talk about the puja specifically. So, I'm really happy to be with you. This is a joyous occasion for me, coming at the moment of, let's say this is the biggest moment of change in my life since I met Rudy, which was 48 years ago. So, and maybe this is the last time I'll ever do this kind of teaching. So thank you for coming for it, and we'll do the best we can to see that you leave here competent in this practice. And then I'm going to also, I will do a few other things. I want to do a teaching on the derivation of the mantras. There's a whole layout in Tantra Loka which is translated by my friend Alexis Sanderson, who used to be at Oxford and now lives here. Alexis is here translating the Tantra Loka, under our auspices. There's a whole layout that Abhinavagupta does in Tantra Loka about the meaning of each of the letters in the Sanskrit alphabet that is the template from which all the mantras in the Shakta Shaiva system are derived. So the Sri Vidya mantra is a complex mantra, and it explains this background will teach how the Shakta Shaivas thought about language. My own idea is that quantum physics, which I read a lot of, to the extent that I am able. Suppose at this point I should say hi to Chris Jackson, who's watching on the webcast, because he is an assistant professor at New Mexico. He left here. He lived here for a number of years, and then he went to New Mexico, where he is teaching quantum theory and working on quantum computing. I read quantum physics because quantum physics is a language that has evolved to attempt to describe the world that we live in, and to attempt to, in many cases, shockingly, and confusingly, make sense of our reality. In fact, so far it's not making sense of it. It's making it more confusing in some ways. But I read quantum physics, and I guess because my mind is already steeped in Sri Vidya and in Siddha Yoga, I look at quantum physics and I think, this language and that language have a lot of similarities. There seems to be some resonance in it. And what really impresses me is that the ancients were able to they were able to distill, and over the course of thousands of years, mind you, not over the course of the 100 years that quantum physics has existed, they were able to derive an understanding of our world that seems to me to be, for the most part, completely consistent with what we're seeing in quantum physics. I look at the lines in the Sri Chakra, the 4 down lines and triangles that are related to Shiva, and the 5 up lines that are related to the goddess, and I think, they're talking about wave function. And they're talking about matter and antimatter, and how it is that the masculine which is the destructive feature of the universe, is gobbling up most of the feminine, which is the creative, expressive nature of the universe, but not completely, so that there is, in fact, from the goddess, a universe that exists. And this process, this dynamic process of constantly pouring forth and constantly reabsorbing at the same time, a little more on balance toward the expressing, gives us a universe to exist in the first place. Oh, and when we talk about bindus, bindu is the center point in the chakra. It turns out that right now, the simplest understanding of quantum gravity is that it is quantum gravity, is a field of magnetic resonance that is circular, and because of that is atemporal, has no time. It is a field in which, because time is a measurement of entropy, it is a field in which there is no dissipation of anything. And in that field, the connection between different bindus, there is a separation of bindus and a coming together which gives volume to space. Anyway, it's wild. But the main thing is, this language, helps me to understand a little bit about Shakti Shaivism, and, makes me impressed with the intuition of the Shakti Shaivas and their constant, over 1,000 years, coming back and coming back and coming back to understand and discuss and argue and understand again and again the nature of the ultimate reality, till they come to this place that is completely counterintuitive, which is everything is simply one thing, and that is very pure awareness. Everything is, life doesn't come from nothing. Life doesn't come from dead. Life only comes from life, and therefore our lives are an expression, not an effect of the livingness of the entire universe, which is the goddess. So, there is a kind of contemporariness to this practice when we really start to think about it deeply. And also, I'm teaching it in this way. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm way digressed. I want to teach you the derivation of the mantras, because I want you to understand that the quantum physics of the ancients was linguistics. Language and quanta, the little tiny units of, tiniest units of measurement in quantum physics, have exactly the same properties. And it was the exploration of language and sound and light that sort of drove the Shakti Shaivas and underlied lots of their discussion. So I want to teach that. I just want you to have that. So in case you ever want to go deeply in this, you will understand that you have the opportunity to figure out something for yourself that maybe I never figured out for my, that I never explained, never caught my attention. You will, all of us together will have the opportunity to take this ancient conversation, which has been going on for thousands of years, which really attracts me, because I think if these people have cared about this conversation enough to keep it going as the best that they could for all this time, there's something powerful in it. And we are taking this conversation and we are slightly translating it into our own language and our own experience, our own contemporary circumstance, to go forward and be able to explore ever more deeply, this situation. Oh yeah, I forgot, Joe, who's among us today, is also a physicist of a very high order who is stationed in an experimental lab in France. Ta-da, ta-da. I know it. I also want to teach, after we talk about the derivation of the mantras, because that's fundamental to Shakti Shaivism, I want to teach the Kaula practices of Shakti Shaivism. And because it is this Kaula practice, this Kaula practice that affirms the divinity of our bodies in a non-dual reality. This body is not the location of sin that my Catholic priests and nuns, as when I was growing up, taught me it was. I've always been sort of a butthole when it comes to, being told this is the way it is. And I always figured, if I needed a good dogma and a good doctrine, why did I ever leave the Catholic Church? It's one of the best. It's proved itself over a couple thousand years. I have always really tried to understand the deeper reality of my experience. And to that end, I have spent many nights in cremation grounds, living among not the Gauris, the descendants of the Karpalikas, and staying with various tantrics in Nepal, and doing chud practice, in 108 cemeteries, well, not 108, but in many cemeteries. So, I want to talk about Kaolism and the divinity of the body and the divinity of desire and the divinity of pleasure, joy, and beauty. That's a separate teaching that I will do before I die. At least I'll write it out if I don't deliver it in person. And the final thing is that I'm working with Alexis Sanderson to create a formal initiation ritual, initiation transmission ritual in the system of Sri Vidya, that is completely appropriate, within the ancient systems and also is reflective of our modern circumstance. So there's 3 other things I want to do around this, which, will happen in the next year or so, which I'll let you know about in case you're interested. There is, what we're giving you now is the simple, basic practice. There's an enormous elaboration. Another thing I forgot to tell you is, basically there are 2 trends in ritual practice. The 2 trends over time are elaboration and simplification. I studied elaborate ritual detail in South Karnataka and Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which, and so the practice actually took an entire day or even 2 days to complete. It would take a day to make the mandala, and then a day to gather the ritual offerings, and an entire day to do the puja. But that isn't going to work for you guys. And it's certainly not going to work as a daily practice. So what we have done is, according to the guidance of the most powerful tantric guy that I've ever met, Ram Dayal Shastri, with his guidance, we have simplified this ritual to its ultimate, and maintain the absolute essential aspects of it from the traditional point of view, but liberated it from most of its complication. To try to keep the actions that you perform within your ritual setting meaningful to you. At the same time, I'm acknowledging that you may want to, maybe you have time to spend 3 days doing your ritual practice, in which case, that information will be made available to you. We will teach you how to do, the 1008 dhyasas of the various goddesses, and the 51 Ganesh nyasas, and so on and so forth. But not this weekend. This is the core practice which we hope you will take away. So, yeah, and the final thing will be the initiation. So, thank you very much for being here. Moni is going to meet you at 2. She's a wonderful teacher. I'll see you tonight in class. Tomorrow morning for the talk about the Sri Chakra, and etc. Namaste, everybody. Very happy to see you.